This week for the project, we're going to install a set of stainless steel brake lines from Versa Speed on our Versa. To start with, I'm going to get the car up on jack stands and I'm going to take the tires off so I can get to the brake lines. Okay, now to start with, the brake lines are here right in the rear axle, and here's a spare tire, and the exhaust canister comes over here. The lines are actually, the pieces we're going to replace are a rubber line. Usually say on them Nissan 1/8 SAE, so you know what they are. They're a black rubber with a metal end here. From the engine room all the way back to here is a metal line. Then we go to rubber, and then back to metal line when we go from here to the axle. So what we'll do is we'll replace those. To start with, I took a 10mm open-end wrench. I'd recommend using a flare wrench if possible. That way you don't round off the flare nut edges. I'm going to break those loose, and I'm going to hand loosen them until they slide out. Then I'm going to let this just drain, and I'm going to let it drip all the brake fluid out. Now if you notice, I do have a latex glove on, and I'll put one back on this other hand. Brake fluid is very toxic to your hands. It'll eat paint off of cars, it'll stain clothing, so be very careful with it when you're letting it drain. Just let it drain, and then you can take the top mount off, which is directly above it. Same thing. 10mm. Take it out loose. Once it's drained, you can take this hose out. Now these clips that hold this in, just grip it with a set of open-end wrenches. You can pull this loose, set it aside, and the hose will just come straight out, and you can let it hang and let it vertically drain that way. Once we have it drained out, we'll take this off, and we'll get the new hoses put back on. Okay, now that I've got everything taken apart, you notice my first brake line is going in. Top here, I actually threaded the flare nut from the gold on this side to the line going in as much as I could, hand tight. Now I'm going to put my lock clip on. I'm going to hand start it with the two edges underneath, and then I'm going to tap it in place. Once it's all the way in, I'll then torque this one. It's going to be to about 17, I think it's 16.2 Newton meters, 17 Newton meters based on the factory service manual. Then I'm going to move to this one at the top, and then I'm going to do the far one on the inside here, and then I'll do the near one. Just do it in that sequence. That's going to give you the most tool access, make sure everything's torqued right and all the way around. And all you see all this fluid here, I'm going to clean it out, wipe it down with water and a towel, make sure everything's cleaned off. And then once we'll do that, once the brake lines are in, we can bleed the system. Okay, here's the finished product. Everything's been torqued properly, all the clips put back in, and the lines routed. Now it's time to bleed the brakes. Okay, to start bleeding the brakes, I'm going to fill up my master cylinder, and I'm going to fill it to the max line or even just a little bit beyond. So I'm going to lose some fluid as I bleed anyway, so it's going to go back down. I also want to disconnect the negative cable on the battery, and then I'm going to move to the rear. Okay, I've moved to the back side of the vehicle, and I'm going to start to bleed the passenger side rear. That will be the furthest away, and it'll take the most fluid. To start with, I've purchased a one-man bleeder kit. All it is just a hose inside of a bottle, and this nice little magnet that will stick to the car. The hose is going to run to the back side of the axle, right here. And that's where the bleeding hose is going to be, the nipple. So the hose is just going to go over that to provide an airtight seal. I can turn it with the 8mm wrench and turn it left to loosen it up. And then I'm going to go inside of the cabin and pump the brakes 5 times, pushing it all the way to the floor. Okay, I'm done with the rear. I've now bled both sides. I've tightened up my bleeder screw, put my rubber cap back on. I've had to do 4 or 5 pumps on the brake, come back and check to make sure there's no leaks in the system. And then I've also filled up the reservoir on the master cylinder twice. Just take your time doing this. Remember, brakes have to be done right the first time. There is no second chance. So take your time, make sure there's no leaks. Once you're done with the rear, you can go ahead and put the tires back on, tighten the lug nuts to 93 foot-pounds, and then we're going to move on to the front.